so he probably doesn't need an introduction, but I'm going to introduce him a little bit anyway in relation to the sort of things that he'll be talking about tonight. Michael was one of the founding members of this very heritage group in 2004, set up to preserve and promote the heritage of this area. He's been involved in lots of campaigns, as you will, as most of you will know, in relation to the heritage of this area. And I just know some of these from photographs I've seen online of actions he's been involved in. An action to try and prevent the loss of the view of Kilmainham jail from the garage along South Circular Road near Kilmainham Cross there. In trying to preserve unsuccessfully the orchard shop, again at Kilmainham Cross. The effort to save St Jude's Church, which along Inchicore Road, which wasn't successful. The church is gone, but the spire was left, and the spire is being nicely incorporated into a private house there at the moment. And not most significantly, because all of his work heritage activity has been significant, but this very building, as you will know, as most of you will know, was in danger. Well, nobody knew what was going to happen to it when St Michael's School said it was going to close down. And it took a lot of community action to get it, and the look of the year 2016 approaching to get this taken into, but it was already in public ownership, but to get its heritage value recognised. He is more recently has been involved in attempting successfully, I think we can say successfully, to get Inchicore Library, the old library building on Emmett Road, to get it made useful for public and community use. I'm sure he'll tell us a bit more about that, if not during his talk, at the end of it. And in relation to tonight's talk, of course, a passion of his for 25 years, he's calling this talk the Dash to Save Kilmainham Mill. He might explain to us why he used the word dash, because it's been a 25-year battle. It's not quite over yet, but he'll tell us a bit more about that. So, Michael, would you tell us about the Dash to Save Kilmainham Mill?
Okay, ladies, a card here. I know. I want to start by saying how much I appreciate having Francis as the chairman of our heritage group. He joined us about 3 or 4 years ago, and he's absolutely been spectacular in what he's done since. He's put up an enormous amount of very valuable information on Facebook pages, and he's done walks and he's arranged talks. I'm a geriatric. I hung out with Michael Conaghan when we set up the group back in 2004, the Heritage Group, and like all geriatrics, we spent most of our time arguing and got very little done. But since Francis came on the scene, the group has really taken off, and it's really fantastic. So I want to thank Francis for the work he's done, and it makes a big difference to me. As he said about the barracks, we were very lucky about the 2016 commemorations. Amazing thing about that was, how we achieved that was, we had Angus O'Snuddick, the Sinn Féin TD, and we had David McFarlane, who was a leading member of the British Legion. We got the two of them to come in to meet the minister, sit together, knee to knee, and persuade the minister that the barracks was worth investing. Because at that time, we were talking 2013, in the run-up, we had the Troika here, and they didn't have a farthing. They didn't have a farthing in the kitty. So getting the money to do this place up was a major thing. And Michael and one or two other people were involved in that. So I'll get on to my talk about the mill, the Dash to Save Kilmainham Mill. The whole saga of Kilmainham Mill has gone on now for more than 25 years. Michael Conahan, the deputy principal of the Inchicore College, who later became a TD and Lord Mayor of Dublin, used to bring his students to down to Kilmainham Mill to see the River Comac wind itself around the mill and through the ancient cottages of Lady Lane and Carrickfile Terrace. He struck up a relationship with Damien Shine, the owner of the mill, and he persuaded Dublin City Council to commission a conservation report on Kilmainham Mill back in 2001. That's how far it goes back. At that time, the council were considering buying the mill, but that plan fell through. Mainly the Department of the Environment, or whatever they call it, said local government or something at the time, said we're not going to pay for it. And the whole question of Kilmainham Mill remained on the agenda of the Heritage Group from 2004. In 2013, after 10 years of failing efforts, the Heritage Group split into two subgroups, one to concentrate on Richmond Barracks and one to concentrate on Kilmainham Mill. I chose to go with the Richmond Barracks group. With the success of the Richmond Barracks group, I then turned my attention to Kilmainham Mill. Sadly, the Kilmainham Mill subgroup had been less successful during the previous 3 years of its existence, and no progress had been made. In December 2016, I decided to launch a completely new, totally separate campaign from the Heritage Group in the hope of bringing in new and fresh personnel to tackle this intractable issue. I booked the Patriot in for a public meeting, and I booked the Patriot in for the public meeting and sent out hundreds of invitations by email to various different databases. I got thousands of leaflets printed, and myself and my wife, Helena, went about the local area delivering leaflets over the course of a couple of weeks. The meeting was a huge success, with only 50 different ideas as to what way to progress. Luckily, having spent a year chairing the St. Michael's Regeneration, I had the skill and to curb the enthusiasm of the 10 megalomaniacs present who wanted to take over the meeting, and I prevented the gathering from going off in 10 different directions at the same time. Eventually, it was agreed that our objective would be to get Dublin City Council to buy the mill. How it was to be restored and what possible use was to be made of it would be left to a later date, as no agreement seemed remotely possible. We had sufficient difficulty in agreeing a strategy about getting the council to buy the mill. At first, it was all about petitions and posters. Luckily, as the months went by, those attending the monthly meetings were whittled down to the rational and dedicated. Michelle Healy took up the job as secretary, which was no mean task considering the chaos that we encountered at early meetings. Nonetheless, she kept all those who expressed an interest constantly informed in the campaign's progress. Robert Foley commissioned a series of pull-up posters, you know those ones that you pull up like that, you know, for display at events organised by the group. Raymond Lambert, recently deceased sadly, and Fintan Connolly and Morris Cohn organised a very successful Facebook page. Vincent Stapleton, who was the owner of the Patriot Inn, hosted our meetings month after month in the Patriot Inn. Fintan Connolly also made an aerial video of the mill showing the surrounding landscape and the adjacent graveyards and the luxurious vegetation, which were very impressive to see. Mary Waddell and Raymond and Robert put together a presentation on the mill for use in schools, outlining the history of the mill, the course of the Comac River, the flora and fauna surrounding the mill. Our group met with Dublin City Council officials on numerous occasions and were at all times assured that the council still had the intention to purchase the mill. The mill was in receivership and a number of other impediments existed. The council wanted vacant possession of the property, but there was a sitting tenant on the site. This obstacle had existed for a number of years without any resolution. I organised a private meeting between the CEO of Dublin City Council, the Assistant CEO of Dublin City Council, and the sitting tenant. They went for a few points and had a chat. Meanwhile, our group gave an oral presentation to the Area Committee of Dublin City Council. Several of the local politicians joined the campaign, including Angus O'Snuddy TD, Joan Collins TD, Breed Smith TD, Councillor Paul Hand, Councillor Vincent Jackson, Councillor Tina McVeigh, and Senator Catherine Ardagh. I approached Damien Shine, the sitting tenant, and he agreed to give our group a guided tour of the mill. We invited the Lord Mayor, Micheál McDonagh, to join us, and he fully endorsed our campaign. Meanwhile, Michelle, Robert, Mary and Raymond composed a brochure setting out the history of and the potential of the mill, and Robert organised to have it printed. Luckily, Vaughan Corrigan had organised a fundraiser for the campaign, which had been hugely successful, and the money raised came in handy for the production of the brochure. I asked the newly elected Lord Mayor Niall Ring if he would launch our brochure. He readily agreed, stressed his full support for the campaign, and offered us the Mansion House as a venue for the launch. At the same time, I asked Mr. Brendan Kenny, Assistant CEO of Dublin City Council, if he would fund a feasibility study for the possible viable use of the mill. Mr. Kenny pointed out that such a feasibility study had already been done, and he provided us with a copy of it. We were suitably impressed with the in-depth detail of the study, and it greatly assured us that the council were actually serious about buying the mill. I subsequently met the manager, city manager, Owen Keegan, coincidentally and accidentally, and he assured me that the council were hell-bent on purchasing the mill and that it would be developed as a completely heritage-orientated project. Now, that's important. That was an important statement for him to make, because when Damien failed to sell the mill to the council back in 2003-2004, he went into partnership with some financial institutions, and they got permission to build 40 apartments on the site. The only reason that didn't happen was because of the financial crash. So when he said that, when Owen Keegan said that it would be developed as a completely heritage-orientated project, that was important for us to hear. After an agreement was reached between Brendan Kenny and Damien Shine, the council bought the mill in 2018, with the final decision being delivered by Owen Keegan, the city manager. So that's how we got it. And you might say we achieved it at lightning speed, the dash to save the mill, because although we had been trying for years and years, it was obviously a money pit. They didn't want to touch it. It was going to take 10 years to do, and cost 10 million, and, you know, it was going to be a headache. So there, but we got it, we persuaded them to do it in 2 years. Amazing, you can't get the council to do anything in 2 years.
Yeah.
So that's what we did. And I want to say something about the importance of the mill, right? Kilmainham Mill is one of the few sites in the city of Dublin which provides an opportunity to illustrate the industrial heritage of the city of Dublin. The mill is situated on the River Kilmainham, which winds its way from the moat of Drimnagh Castle through the village of Inchicore and all the way to Kilmainham until it finally enters the Liffey and goes on to the sea. All along the length of this ancient landscape, the river was populated by a series of mills which were driven by water power and water wheels. Besides the connection of this particular mill with the monks of the monastery of the Priory of Kilmainham and the building of the Royal Hospital, the mills all along the river included one owned by Arthur Guinness for the preparation of materials for his brinery business just down the road in James Street. The site of Kilmainham Mill was in continuous use as a mill from the 16th century through to the year 2000, and it's the only unaltered 19th century fulling mill remaining within Dublin City. In 2001, in the 2001 conservation plan was commissioned in recognition of its significance. This irregularly shaped site comprised 3,395 square metres and is located in Kilmainham on the land surrounded by Rouserstown Lane, Kilmainham Lane to the north, the Kilmainham River to the south, and by the South Circular Road on the west. Beyond the Kilmainham River to the south are the single-storey traditional terrace cottages of Carrickfile Terrace, Lady Lane and Millbrook Terrace. So that's the significance of it in today's terms. It really is like an heirloom to have. Now we'll have a look, I want to give a look at the history of Kilmainham Mill. Looking at the history, it was originally part of the property of the Priory of Kilmainham. We go to the, go forward a few there until we get the project, till we go to the map of the, yeah. We'll go back to them later. Yeah. Now this is the Priory of Kilmainham. This is a reconstruction. It's going to be used in a map, of the town. And the Royal Irish Academy are still working on it. We're working on it for a new years. But we can't enlarge this. Unfortunately, we can't enlarge this. But this is John's Priory. It was built by Strongbow in 1174. The Priory was built by Strongbow. And this portion here, the people who did this map, it's from the 13th century. It depicts what the area was like in the 14th century, 14th century. And it just gives you a map, but it's based on accounts and descriptions. So it has to be accurate, or fairly accurate. And it shows here the bridge, and it shows the mill, Kilmainham Mill, the River Kilmainham there. This is what it looked like. Okay? So that's to give us some idea of the history. And the Priory Manor or Castle, it was described in different ways by different people talking about it at different times. It was either a priory, because the priors of Kilmainham were the viceroys. I'll go into that in a minute. The priory Let me see, I'm losing myself. The Priory Manor or Castle of Kilmainham was an estate encompassing Kilmainham just outside the city of Dublin. It was one of several manors that existed in Dublin after the arrival of the Anglo-Normans in the 12th century. The lands on the banks of Kilmainham were granted to the Knights Hospitallers of St. John of Jerusalem in 1174. Strongbow had a castle constructed. Can you show the castle again? This is my interpretation of what the castle looked like, but it actually had loads and loads of other buildings around. It was knocked down in 1656, and some of the spoilage from the castle was used to build what we have the Royal Hospital today. Strongbow had a castle constructed close to the present site of the Royal Hospital, Kilmainham, for the Knights Hospitallers. This was the same site where St. Moynan had a monastery in the 7th century, and where Brian Boru camped his army on the eve of the Battle of Clontarf in 1014. From 1192 until 1560, the castle or priory of Kilmainham remained the seat of government in Ireland. During that time, government was administered by the priors of Kilmainham. They were invariably the king's viceroys, and that's where they held their court. In the reign of Queen Elizabeth I, Dublin Castle became the centre of English power in Ireland. Before that, the Lord Lieutenants held their courts at the manors of Kilmainham. In 1559, the Earl of Sussex, on being reappointed Lord Lieutenant, found that the building at Kilmainham had been damaged by a storm, and he held his court at the Palace of St. Sepulchre. The following year, Elizabeth I ordered that Dublin Castle be upgraded to enable the Lord Lieutenant to reside there. The last Lord Deputy recorded as a resident of Kilmainham Castle was William Russell between the years 1594 and 1596. The historian James Ware recorded that the ruins of the Priory Castle were demolished around 1656, and the Royal Hospital was built on the same site approximately 30 years later. Throughout all this period, there were 2 mills on the grounds of the Priory, one at Island Bridge and the other at the ancient village of Old Kilmainham. This is substantiated by the records in the rolls of Queen Elizabeth I, where she approved money for the repair of the mill. Can we find that one? This is it here. This is a petition for this guy wanted to rent the grounds of the. He wanted, and that was in 1565. And this petition went to the Queen, and he wanted, including the mills and weirs. Oh, is that the way to spell weirs? That's in the rolls. That's the way they kept their information in those days, yeah. Let me see. And the next one, this one here is 1565, Queen Elizabeth. An estimate, in other words, an invoice, was sent by Sir Michael Fitzwilliams, both at the time, and the decay is basically he's claiming to repair the castle, the priory, or the castle, or whatever it was. And the castle still existed for another 100 years, but it was in decay, even though it wasn't used for the same purposes. But the mills and weirs were still there, and he was seeking money from Queen Elizabeth to repair the mill, the main, in 1565. As As I say, this is substantiated by the records of the rolls of Queen Elizabeth, where she approved money for the repair of Kilmainham Mill at that time. In April 1675, the Lord Lieutenant of Ireland, Sir Arthur Cable, Earl of Essex, wrote to King Charles II about a legal case that he was involved with Sir Maurice Eustace, disputing the ownership of the mill, of Kilmainham Mill. Can we find the letter there? This is the letter that he wrote. I won't go into everything he says. Some of it was probably lying. What he said, this was just 5 years before the Royal Hospital at Kilmainham was built on the same site. What is really amusing here is that 3 streets in Dublin are called after these two men: Capel Street, Essex Street, and Eustace Street. Now, before I go on to the present situation, we'll go back and look at the photographs of the groups. So, yeah, the first group is myself. That was on the Dwarf property. That's myself. That's George Sanders, who owned quite a bit of property and who was associated with St. Jude's Church. Yeah, I think he was, on the committee of St. Jude's Church. His family, his children went there and whatever. The date is 2001. This is Michael Connor, who led the campaign originally for the mill, and this is Vanessa Sweeney. This is when we had a group called the Kilmainham and Inchicore, or the Inchicore and Kilmainham Development Project. At that time, around there, the area was really in decline. All of the shops were in poor circumstance. I had a little newspaper I used to go around, and they'd give me €25 for an ad in the paper. But I found they could only give me one ad a year, so I couldn't bring it out every month. And that was because business was so bad, things were so down and out. So that was, we had that project. But one of the things we were even campaigning for at that time was for the mill. Next one. Now, this was in 2014, or 14 or 14. And this is Jimmy Dean. He was Minister for Heritage at the time. This is Damien Shine, who was the owner of the mill. This is Brendan Kenny, who was played a big role. Peter Keenan, who was a local architect and who was an expert on Dutch buildings. He's obsessed with Dutch buildings. Oh, why? Obsessed with Dutch buildings. This is Morris Cohen. Rita Sutton, who was the treasurer. Roseanne Farrell. And that's her name is gone. And this Raymond Bobbin, unfortunately, he's deceased. So that's the next one. Yeah, this is 2017. It's before when we were still in the midst of the campaign. And this, the Lord Mayor came up. This is Damien. He brought us on the tour at that time. This is Ray Lambert, who unfortunately has also deceased since. I'm still here. I was that yeah, I don't know where I'm here. This is Robert Tony. He spent a few bob doing the posters and paying for things. This is Cathy Bourne. Very important person in this because she worked in the mill for 20 years and she can give you a good outline of what working in the mill is. Raymond Boblin, again, he's deceased. Michael, Michal McDonagh. This is Damien, this is Von Corrigan. She raised the money for us. Mary Riddell is in the audience here tonight, and she did tremendous work with Clinton. He made the area video. Next one. This is when they came. This is Tina McVeigh, one of the councillors, Rory McGinley, a councillor, Creamy Dudalik, who had been Lord Mayor the previous year or 2 years, Micheál McDonagh, and then sorry, he was a Sinn Féin councillor as well. But anyway, they all put their shoulder to me. Okay. This is Peter Keenan, he's an architect. You know, many of the buildings he's done in the area are very unusual, and they now seem to have round towers or something on them for some reason. You'll see them as you go down there. Oh, the main and Lady Lane around down that way, Roseanne Farr, and I can't remember the names of the names. Okay, next one. This was after we got the mayor, and this is Malcolm Noonan, he was minister. And he was very useful to us because he pushed for the finances to do the stabilisation work. And this is Bruce Phillips, who's the area manager. Angela Love, Mary was there. This is Esau, who is Esau Bourne, who manages the barracks here and who runs Henrietta Street. This is councillor or Green TV, escapes me now. And Lorna is here. And this is Donegal Doolan, as I said. He has been a driving force over the years. So I think that's it. And then we come to the last one. Now, this is when we launched the brochure in the Mansion House. Creating Donald Tina McVeigh, Rory McGinley, Breed Smith, Angus O'Snuddy, Raymond Lambert, Lorna Paddy, John Stapleton, Michelle Haley, our secretary, Lord Mayor Niall Ring, Morris Cohn, Finton, Paul Hand, Councillor Paul Hand, Mary, Mannix Flynn, Vincent Jackson, and Robert. So those are the people who worked on the campaign over the years. Okay, where do we go from here? I'm back here. So anybody want to ask any questions, particularly about the Priory, the Royal Hospital, or anything like that? Because that's what makes the area very significant. And people don't realise that the government of Ireland was actually administered out of Ireland, out of Kilmainham, out of that site down there, for nearly 500 years on Queen Elizabeth moved it. You know, from the time of Strongbow up to the time that Queen Elizabeth moved it. And basically because the castle fell, the castle was blown down in a big storm, a lot of damage was done to it.
Sorry, Fair? Is it beside Bully's Acre? Is that where the location is? Or?
Well, this is the great quandary. They allow concerts there. Christie plays there quite a lot. They allow concerts, and it's a big money spinner for them. I don't know who gets the money, but the point is, we're not allowed to do a proper archaeological excavation, which is what's needed to know exactly where the foundations of the original priory were. Everybody suspects, and we have one or two people who were. As I said, the people who did this map have done some very important investigations into documentation. At that stage, you can only go by documentation. And you have to be very good at Latin sometimes to understand what's being said. The prior of Kilmainham, who was his name was Roger Outlaw, or Outlaw, and he took over as prior in 1315, I think it was. The Knights Templars were suppressed. I believe that the Knights Templars were in Kilmainham, but everybody else says, I'm in Egypt. They never were. But anyway, they were suppressed in 1309, and in 1314 or 15, Roger Outlaw was made prior of Kilmainham. He was a Knights Hospitaller, or the Knights of Malta. The Knights of Malta are very important because they've been in competition with the Pope up until, I think, Benedict, or I don't know, was it Benedict or Francis? downgraded the Knights of Malta, but they had enormous power in the Catholic Church, and up until recently. But the Knights of Malta, also the Knights Hospitaller, these were all people who fought in the Crusades, and power still extends up to the present day in some cases. But the Knights, Roger Outlaw was made Prior of Kilmainham, and he was Prior of Kilmainham, the King's Viceroy, for 29 years. And actually it's recorded that he actually loaned the King money. I can't remember which King's it was. He loaned the King's money to go fight in France or wherever the King happened to be having a row at the time. But he was entrusted him. But his first job, when he took over in 13, 14 or 15, was to give an account of all the property owned by the Knights Templar who had been suppressed and who were now granted to the King and to the Knights Hospitallers. And they administered them from then on, right up until Henry VIII suppressed all the monasteries. A very interesting thing, myself and Francis got to see St. Mary's Abbey. Has anybody here been in St. Mary's Abbey?
Yeah.
It's absolutely magic to go in there and see that. But when the King Henry VIII suppressed all the monasteries, most of them were taken over by local people or his cronies or all over England and Ireland, whatever. And even Kilmainham continued to exist. It continued to exist. But St. Mary's Abbey was completely demolished, and that was one of the most significant. They had 7,000 acres in the centre of Dublin, and they were one of the most richest orders. I don't know what order was it, Cistercians, or I don't know what it was called. But anyway, they were the richest order of all. But Silken Thomas had thrown his sword down in Mary's Abbey, and that upset the king quite a bit. So he didn't just order it to be abolished, he ordered it to be demolished. So the reason is it doesn't exist except for the chapel under, and that's really something to see. You really feel as if you're going back 500 years when you step into that. Oh, it's beautiful, beautiful. And it was only really rediscovered in the 1800s or something, wasn't that?
Yeah.
Any more important? Yes.
Okay. As you approach the Patriots Inn, opposite Kilmainham Jail, there is a low wall about hip height. And if you look over that wall, there's a big drop, right?
Yes.
Now, what that would suggest to me is that one time the River Kilmac ran down there, and that little low wall, that was actually part of a bridge, right? Now, am I correct? Did the Kilmac run down that way to the mill, and was it later, what's the word I'm looking for, was the course of the river later changed?
No, what they did was, the Kilmac actually, and it showed it quite clearly in this, which I was amazed to see, that this is the river here. This is the Kilmac, the Crooked River, or whatever they call it, or whatever the order is. This here is the mill race. It says mill race. And what they did was they took off a tributary, they dug it away, a tributary, to let the water come down and feed the mills. So there's a mill there, which the people doing this map put in, supposed to be in the 13th century. That would be approximately where Hibernian Mills, which was a very important mill, much more important, say, than the main mill, and it was owned by Welsh people who came over and brought over their workers and everything, and it existed for a long time, the Hibernian Mills. But this is the mill race as such, and it was narrow and intended just primarily to operate the water wheels along the river. So the mills weren't operated directly by the river. I mean, they were operated by the mill rates. So that's what that is. I think that's what you're talking about. That's the question you're asking, is it? Yeah?
Well, so what we see there, that will be the remains of the mill race.
Yeah.
But I just say,
Yes, yeah.
it's worth your while if you're interested to, you can't really see that from your sitting position. Just Google reconstruction Kilmainham Priory and you'll be able to see there's labels and writing in there. But if I could just say, this is the river that you now see.
Right.
And in here is the mill race, taken off from the river further upstream. So yes, when you go over you're right, it's a double bridge over carries the South Circular Road over both. It would be the South Circular Road would be around here, somewhere like this. So that is roughly the grounds of the Royal Hospital Kilmainham right now. So the South Circular Road, something like the South Circular Road is actually on this map going to Island Bridge. Island Bridge has always been there with its mills on the Liffey. So that's something like the present South Circular Road, but it doesn't come any further. So the bridge on the South Circular Road is roughly here, the river to the south and the mill race to the north.
All right.
But if you get that at home and have a look at it, you'll see various things written in. You know, it'll give you a better idea of where that's situated.
Right, thank
Yes,
you.
Where does the mill race go off where does it leave the Kilmac up on the west side?
it goes back into it. It does.
I know it comes into it after the mill, but where does it leave the Kilmac on the west side?
Where does it start from?
Where is it? Because it's a
Well, in the 19th century, there was a mill pond where the park is, Grattan Crescent Park. So that was a pond.
Yeah.
The river is still running there, but the pond, so it's split up just before the pond. Created a pond, and you have sluices. As you wanted the water in Hibernian Mill further upriver, and I think the two mills must have been operated together. So you'd collect water in this pond, and then you'd release it when you want to turn your wheels in the two mills downstream. So again, marked in there. Where is it? There's the mill up there, and that's like Hibernian Mill. So the mill pond is above that.
Above that,
on the river.
Yeah, the mill pond.
There was
So the Hibernian mills was the metropolitan mill?
Exactly.
Yeah.
There was a weir at the rear of the Inchicore cinema, and that was where the two rivers split.
Yeah.
The mark went one way, and the pond, mill pond, was about 6 feet higher at that spot, or maybe 10 feet higher than the Mark River.
There is quite a bit of expertise on this. I gave up doing research about 10 years ago, you know what I mean? Yeah, I've forgotten more than I ever knew, that kind of stuff, you know. Yeah. Anybody else have questions?
What's the current state of play?
Yes, we're going.
Sorry, I thought you were finished. Sorry, I didn't realise. I didn't mean to jump the gun.
Well, you're not jumping the gun. My Alzheimer's is kicking in. I forgot to get to that. The present situation is that Dublin City Council have spent £1.5 million stabilising the mill, repairing the roof, strengthening the floors, repairing the chimney, removing asbestos and Japanese knotweed. However, after intensive consultation with the local community, Dublin City Council have failed to publish the master plan, which they promised us, for the future use of the mill. Moreover, no financial provision has been made for any improvements to the mill over the next 2 years. that money would have to be put into what they call the capital program. It wouldn't be decided what they were actually going to do with it, but the money would be there and it could be drawn down for various different things. It's going to take, I suppose, 7, 8, 9, 10 million to eventually do the job. They're not in a hurry to do it at the moment. They think the way they feel that they've stopped it from falling down and they'll get around to it eventually. Unfortunately, it has been moved from the department that it was in into the parks and rivers. So the person who's in charge of parks and rivers doesn't have a huge interest in mills. That's the situation, and it's difficult. What our group, the mill group, is trying to do at the moment is to try and invigorate the powers that be to pay attention to it again. And it's going to be another campaign to get them to pay attention. So that's the present. Somebody said that the Dublin City Council
Yes.
Culture Company,
Yes.
they
Doing
manage,
stewards of it, yeah.
they manage it at the moment. Now, they don't have money to do anything with it. They're not allocated money to do anything with it, but they can open it up and they can bring groups in and show you and give you a talk. But even to do proper talks, you would need facilities like, for example, screens like that, electricity, toilet facilities and everything else. That's not being provided for at the moment. So somebody said that there's something advertised in the way of something that's going to happen in October that people be there. The only problem is it's operated by the Dublin City Council Culture Club. You have to join the club to be informed when it's going to happen, because if and when they do advertise it, it's already booked out. That's the problem. And everybody wants to get in to say the mill. Everybody has an interest in it locally, and they're always asking us, can you get us in? And unfortunately, we can't get you in, because we're not in control of it. It's now the property of Dublin City Council, and we can give them our opinions, but we don't exercise any control or power. So, how many people are good at carrying placards? Okay. So, okay, yes, sir. Yeah.
Can you tell me what was operating in the mill before it closed? What did it do?
Well, Damien Shine was very innovative, because what he did was, when he took over from, I didn't mention Noreen Pye or John Loughlin, they were famous for the quality of the textiles that they produced down there. And there's a beautiful video called The Hands video by, what's his name? Shaw Smith. So if you can go on YouTube and look at that. And it showed, luckily enough, this man came over and he did an in-depth film of the entire workings of Kilmainham Mill. And we have it. It's great, you can see it. And you can see it on YouTube. You can go and see it on YouTube. But in that, it shows you Noreen and John Loughlin. When they were at the height of their fame for producing really high quality textiles. Then they sold it to Damien Shine, and he changed it quite a bit. But one of the things he was doing was he was fireproofing materials. So they were no longer making the material. They were, again, the material was being supplied to them, and he, by some method or whatever thing, he made them fireproof. And what the material fireproof, and this material that he was producing at that time was used quite commonly in airplane seats, for seats in airplanes. So, and he sold them to some of the big airliners. So that's what he did. until he sold.
Photograph up there, Michael, the Weaver Shed.
Yes, yeah, the Weaver Shed. This was when Noreen was here. And the Weaver Shed, yeah. And that's because she originally had a place, I think it was in Duke Street. Before herself and her brother bought the mill, I can't remember, was that in 73, when it was around that time. When they bought that, and they did enormous work with it, but prior to that, she already had been in the business of producing high quality textiles. So that's what they did.
And the mill was a well-known finishing mill.
Finishing, yeah.
And the machinery is still there.
Oh, the machinery is still there, but I don't think you need a lot of M43, what is it called, to get those? DWD43.
Yeah. See it.
To get them things done again. No, everybody has a different opinion as to what will eventually be there. There will probably be, small people, a number of people who can go in, operate looms and things like that don't require major power or anything like that. But I can't imagine them ever producing viable products that could wash its face. But it'll probably be used more for community use and for as a tourist attraction. I can imagine this is going to be a huge tourist attraction at some stage. And for specialists who are interested in it, our friend, one of our members here, tours all the mills in England. Tell them about your thing.
Yeah.
Give them a quick talk on your
Right. I used to live in Macclesfield and was always interested in the derelict mills then. And about a year and a half ago, when I was in the north of England, I decided to do a little mill visit to a few places to look at the concept of meanwhile uses, because I saw the mills developing from derelict to partly used to better and better. And I went to an area I didn't really know, but I went to Leeds, to the Sunnybank Mill, where they filmed the Great British Sewing Bee, and it had been a colossal mill making a cloth called worsted for men's suits, and they sold off the huge milling sheds to a Chinese company who carried on doing that, and they took the older Victorian mills, and over the last 20 years or something, they've done them up to have workshops, an art gallery, a cafe, a restaurant, and really interesting bits. Leeds Art School have a shed for middle-sized looms for textile students to learn on, and they've got photographs everywhere detailing the history. And then I went off to Macclesfield, where I used to live, where it's Silk Town. It started to say with silk buttons. I don't know, nobody says why the silk buttons got there, and then when that went out of vogue, they started making silk like jacquard ties. And the Paradise Mill was more or less not functioning, and it's been all done up. And they turned the old art school into a silk museum, and this has all happened in stages, and you can get in some of the time and see some of the things, and then they'd get money, it would get better. And then in Style, just outside Winslow, near Macclesfield, they had the huge Quarry Bank Mill. When I lived there, it was like derelict down in the valley of the River Bollin, and it was Save Style Mill, kind of like Save Kilmainham Mill. They got it sort of going a bit about 30 years ago, and you could go in. It was still sat in a jungle of overgrowth, but you could see inside the mill. It had a little shop and about one working loom. And then it got better. The National Trust took it over, and now it's fully functioning, about 4 floors of mills. It's all cotton. Mills spinning, you see the raw cotton and the cloth being made. They have an exhibition floor on the 4th floor, and it was, when I was there at the end of 2023. It was all about health and safety for mill employees, and they were
Can I just interrupt you? Yeah, so Lorna is a member of the mills, she's on the committee of the Mills and Millers of Ireland, and they represent, how many mills around Ireland would it be? I mean, Skerries is probably the most best
Yes.
known, is it?
Yeah, they've got Skerries, and then they've got lots of mills. We go about 3 times a year to visit mills or anywhere in Ireland, and some of them are functioning, some of them are derelict, some of them, like Skerries, is really quite a tourist attraction. They were windmills, and you get quite a few people on the committee own their own mills, and some of them live in, and 1 or 2 have made them into hotels and wedding functions. But there's an enormous world out there about mills, and only just a couple of weeks ago I went to London, which I do quite often. I've one son over there, and I visited a tidal mill called the House Mill right in East London, not out in the country, a bit like the same sort of position as Kilmainham, and it's absolutely beautiful. It was so, I mean, you get cloth mills and grain mills. This one, it did grind grain, barley, but it wasn't to make wholesome loaves of bread, it was to make gin. So it's a gin mill, and it's not working, but they have guided tours on Sunday. It's beautifully restored, and it's got mill wheels full of pigeons nesting in them, but you can see how they did work, and the tide came up the River Lee. The river itself is a bit sluggish to turn the wheel, but they could harvest the tide with sort of sluice gates, and then open the gates, and the mill wheels would go and grind all the...
Lorna, Francis needs to wind up.
Yeah, right.
I just wanted, there's one map.
I didn't know I was going to have to say.
There's one map that we skipped over there, and I just want to, again, it's one that people might be interested in. You'll see this map online, Kilmainham in 1655, and there's also a few questions there about the location of where we're talking about. There's the castle near Royal Hospital, Kilmainham, Island Bridge, and significant to us is just there's a building with sort of 2 wheels on it, represents the mill, and Kilmainham town. There's a bridge there which is on the site of Kearns Place Bridge. So Kearns Place, when I did a Facebook post about it when it reopened after it was rebuilt, sort of Dublin's newest bridge, but it's one of the oldest bridges as well at that very spot, which links the mill with the town of Kilmainham along Old Kilmainham as we know it today. And there's another mill down there which would be Mount Brown Mill.
Okay.
Again, have a look. If you're interested in maps and old maps in particular, you'll find that online as well.
Can we wind up, Pete?
Yeah. Are there any other questions or comments?
Can I just go off topic from the mill? At the very beginning you mentioned the old library on Emmett Road, and had there been some plan for that?
I'll talk about that when we're finished. I want to end this video, right? Yeah. Okay. Next event.
Yeah, I'm just showing you there what we have coming up next during National Heritage Week. We have a walk and talk along Inchicore Road. We have a talk on Golden Bridge Cemetery by Liam O'Mara, who's written a book on Golden Bridge Cemetery. We organised that particularly this National Heritage Week because it's the 250th anniversary of the birth of Daniel O'Connell, and Daniel O'Connell's link with our own area here is that he founded Golden Bridge Cemetery. And Liam is an expert on that, and you'll be interested in that. During the Dublin Festival of History, I'll be giving a talk on poverty in 18th century Dublin, concentrating on 2 institutions for poor aimed at various aspects of poverty in this area, Dublin City Dublin City Workhouse on the site of the present St James Hospital, and Dr. Stephen's Hospital, also in this area, and founded to cater for Dublin's poor. And I'll be leading a walk during the Festival of History, walking the franchises in the parish of St James. Over 500 or 600 years, the Lord Mayor and important people of Dublin rode the franchises, rode a circle around the city to proclaim, this is Dublin, this is your city. And this walk covers a bit of the route on this Kilmainham, St James's parish area, walking the franchises.